What kind of sinner are you? Do you hide? Do you hurl insults? Or do you pick up the hammer and pound the nails yourself? What kind of sinner are you? Hiding? Hurling? Hammering? We hear about all three of these kinds of people in the Good Friday event recorded for us in Scripture. This first group of people, those hiding, we actually don't even hear about them in the Gospel of Matthew. The disciples. Matthew doesn't record for us where the disciples are. Maybe they're hiding so well that for his telling of the story, they aren't really contributing anything, and so he doesn't even talk about them. If it weren't for Mark and Luke and John, we would not know that the majority of the disciples are afraid, hiding, locked in a room. The goal of the disciples on that night while Jesus is being crucified, their goal was self-preservation, doing what was best for them at the time. If you are a sinner who sins by hiding, it means that you sin in secret. Perhaps you sin in secret for the same reasons those disciples were hiding on that first Good Friday, out of fear. Maybe you sin in secret because you're afraid that if people saw you in your sin, that they might think less of you. Or perhaps you're afraid because that sin that you do in secret, if somebody saw it, perhaps it would tarnish you. Maybe it would ruin your reputation. It could possibly even affect your employment, or even worse, your family. And so you sin in secret, you sin in hiding, you go into that dark place, to that place of temptation. Only after committing the sin do you emerge, almost pretending as if nothing had ever happened. But perhaps your hiding is even greater than that. Maybe you even try to sin by hiding from Jesus himself, and so you step behind him, thinking that you can be out of his sight, out of his reach, because in this moment of your sinning in hiding, you don't really want to hear about Jesus. You don't want to know he's alive. You don't want to know he's real, because if you heard that you are loved, if you heard that you are forgiven, if you had heard that Jesus has called you to live a new life, then you wouldn't be going into that sinful place. But right now, right in this time, you want to hide from your Savior. What kind of sinner are you? Do you hide? Or do you hurl insults? Matthew's story for us isn't short at all on telling us about those who hurl insults on Jesus. After they had already shouted out, "Crucify this man," after he had been whipped and beaten, the Roman soldiers get to take their crack at him. So they bring him into the governor's headquarters and gather around the whole battalion of soldiers. They strip him naked, put a scarlet robe on him, make him look like Roman royalty. They make a crown out of thorns and drive it into his head. Putting his staff in his hand, they kneel in front of him, mocking him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Then they pry that staff out of his right hand, only to use it to hit him repeatedly on the head. It wasn't over there. They took Jesus out onto the streets, parading him through town, and as people passed by and as he passed by others, They hurled insults on him. You who say you're going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. They get him up to that place called Golgotha. It means the place of the skull, and they crucify him there. They put him on the cross, and they even make a sign to put up on the cross. It says it has his charge on it, but really it's just a sign of mockery. It says, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." They don't really believe it, though. They're simply mocking him further, hanging it above his head for all to see. And it's not just the Romans who mock him. His own people, the Jews, the chief priests, scribes, even the elders, they mock him. He saved others, but he can't even save himself. He's the King of Israel. If he wants to, he can come down from the cross. And if he does, then, we'll believe in him then. Let God rescue him now if he wants to, because he says he's the Son of God. Even those criminals crucified next to him, in their dying breaths, heap insults on him. If you are a sinner who sins by hurling insults on Jesus, it means that you're not hiding from him, but it means you're close to him. Close enough to speak to him, close enough to see him, close enough to even spit on him if you want. You are close enough to Jesus that you have seen what he can do. You have seen him utilize his power to save other people. You have watched him work miraculous things, change people's lives for good. And maybe he's even done the same in your life. Done remarkable things, but now, maybe right now, or in your moment of sin, hurling insults on him, you look at your life and you look at this man who claims to be powerful, and you hurl insults on him saying, yeah, you claim to be powerful. Where are you right now? Where are you in my life? Where are you in this society that seems to be falling apart? Yeah, you say to pray to you, and I do. And you say you'll answer according to your will, but I want you to answer the way I want you to. We take his own words about himself and we use them against him. You say you're powerful? Where? You call yourself king, my king? You call yourself love and you say it's for me? Where is it? What kind of sinner are you? Do you hide? Do you hurl insults? Or do you pick up the hammer yourself and pound in that nail? We don't know the name of the man who pounded the nails through the flesh of Jesus on that Friday. But it was the Romans who were charged with making sure the executions happened. And so we would imagine that there would be some sort of Roman official overseeing the whole crucifixion event. And that night, in Matthew's telling of the story, we actually hear a Roman official speak. And we don't know if he was the one who crucified Jesus, but he was there overseeing it. It was a centurion. After Jesus had cried out in a loud voice, hung his head, given up his spirit, the centurion speaks. And the centurion was a military official in charge of 100 officers. You can imagine he had some sort of role, authority there that day. And the centurion speaks after seeing Jesus, after watching an earthquake happen. And the centurion says, truly, this man was the Son of God. Now, was the centurion speaking a Christian confession? Did he go from being a non-Christian to all of a sudden having a miraculous conversion experience? Maybe, but I don't know, and the point can be debated, and many have debated it. That's not my point tonight. My point is this. When you sin by picking up the hammer yourself and the nail and pounding it into the flesh of Jesus Christ, you are so close to him. So personal with him, close enough to look him in the eye, close enough to actually touch him. And when you get that close to Jesus Christ, you realize how real this Jesus actually is. See, sometimes us Christians get ridiculed in our society. People say about us that we just believe in something, some spiritual truth, and if we believe in it enough, then it convinces us to be happy and content. This makes you happy? Content? You see, when you are the one picking up the hammer and the nail, touching Jesus, pounding it into his flesh, looking him in the eye, you realize how real the crucifixion of Jesus is for you and for me, and the reality of the blessings that come from that. But you see, when you are a sinner, hammering the nails into the cross of Jesus Christ, you can't get any closer to him. And it's as if you are saying to him, Jesus, I know who you are. I know what you are doing, and I believe it, and I know that I need it, but right now I'm entering into this point of sin. And I know that I have no way out of it except for you taking this nail on yourself. And I know that it's my sin that's holding you there. I suppose that this is the most honest way to sin. But it's a terrible, gruesome way to go about it. And so we find ourselves grabbing that hammer, grabbing that nail, and in that moment saying, Lord, I need you to do this, because if you don't, I know that it means absolute death for me. So, thank you. What kind of sinner are you? Do you hide? Do you hurl insults? Or do you pick up the hammer and pound the nail yourself? What kind of sinner are you? When they crucified Jesus and lifted him up high on that cross on the hillside, Jesus looked down at all the people below him. And there at his feet was essentially a cross-section of the world's population. There they were, at his feet. There were Romans there, and Jews, chief priests, scribes, elders, those who have mocked him, those who have followed him the last few years, his own mom. They're all there. And they're looking up at him, wondering what he's doing. And maybe they're crying out like you and I are and saying, what kind of sinner am I? Jesus looks down at them and says, you're forgiven. No, that's not the question I asked Jesus. I said, what kind of sinner am I? I want to fix my life, get better, do more in order to please you and get right with you. What kind of sinner am I, Jesus? What kind of sinner are you? You are forgiven. What kind of sinner are you? What kind of sinner are you that this man would give up his life for you? What kind of sinner are you that God would go to such great lengths to give you his grace? What kind of sinner are you? You're a forgiven sinner. You are a redeemed sinner. You are a loved sinner. That's what kind of sinner you are. 3 nights ago, at 3:30 in the morning, my 1-year-old son Max was crying in his crib. Sometimes he'll cry out in the middle of the night and console himself, but he wasn't consoling himself this night. So I got up and went into his room and picked him up, and he calmed down immediately. I couldn't have been in his room more than 2 or 3 minutes, but in that time, I believe God inspired some words to come into my mind. I had been thinking about this message for tonight, and at 3:30 in the morning, words started coming into my mind that I guess you could call them poetry, words of poetry, and it was so clear and so vivid at that time, and it all just fell together. I knew I had to write it down, or I would lose it, and so I went to my phone real quick and typed this poem with sleepy eyes. 2 hours later, I woke up for the morning, and I grabbed my phone quick to see if that was reality, if I had actually typed something, and to see if it actually made sense. And I looked at these words, and they were still clear to me. And so I shared them with a few people, and it had an impact on them. So tonight I'm going to close with these words of poetry, I guess you would call it. If these words mean anything to you, if you'd like to see them again or share them or distribute them, on your way out tonight there will be a stand, and you can pick up a copy or multiple copies, that's fine. These words, I guess you could call it, what kind of sinner are you? What kind of sinner am I, you ask? Yes, I hide and wear a mask. What kind of sinner am I? Yes, I hurl insults and spit in his eye. What kind of sinner am I? I pick up the hammer while he cries and waits to die. You see, if you are anything like me, you'll sin often doing all three. And he, yes, he, speaks from the tree, lovingly, sacrificially to me. Go now. You're forgiven and free. What kind of sinner are you? Hear his words that are trustworthy and true. I love you. And one more time, from the dying King of Jews. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.